I will never forget the look on Emma's face that day when, without flinching, with the cold confidence and dignity possessed only by women who have gone through the hell of betrayal and are not broken by it, I handed her my husband's suitcases, handed them right on the threshold of her immaculately maintained house, at the very moment when her husband appeared on the steps, confused, as if knocked out of reality, looking at the scene with the horror that only happens to people who are suddenly confronted with the truth, which they do not want to believe. That single moment was a moment of absolute, naked shock that pierced like an icy arrow through her perfectly made up eyes, which at that second widened as if they wanted to pop out of their sockets. Her well-groomed, perfectly manicured hand involuntarily flew up to cover her mouth, an instinctive, feminine gesture, like an attempt to hold back a scream, pain, or shame, and it was this moment that was worth every second of the pain that I had to endure in the shadow of their love lies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Gianna Landolfi. I'm 42 years old, and all my adult life I've considered myself a woman who knows how to tell lies, whose sixth sense has never failed, but as it turns out, even the most confident can be blinded by the illusion of love. I work as a Leonting manager, a rare and low-key profession that requires patience, attention to detail, and the ability to understand people, which makes it similar to my previous marriage, calm on the surface, but full of tension inside. Just 3 weeks ago, I was living in the belief that I was in the middle of a solid, time-tested 15-year marriage, the very union that my husband Daniel and I had built step by step, starting with one apartment in the center, ending with a cozy house in Oakwood Terrace, a quiet suburb surrounded by greenery, where every street looked like it was as if it had been designed for postcards, with sprawling trees, neat lawns, and houses so far apart that they created the illusion of privacy, but the neighbors still waved at each other in the morning while picking up the mail. We moved there 2 years ago, naively believing that we had found a place where we could grow old together, grow a garden, drink wine on the veranda on warm evenings, not knowing that so much understatement and hypocrisy were hidden behind these well-groomed facades. Emma and Leon Marinetti lived right across the street. They were what is usually called the perfect couple. He was a charming, charismatic real estate agent who could sell any house with just his voice. She was a woman with impeccable taste who always looked like she stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine. There wasn't a single morning when her blonde hair was out of place, not a day when her outfit looked casual. It was easy with them, maybe even too easy. On the day we met, they came with a bottle of white wine and a box of cookies, which, as it turned out later, Emma did not bake herself at all, but bought at a pastry shop on the corner, which should have been my first warning, the first bell, indicating that external perfection rarely goes hand in hand with sincerity. "You caught me at the right moment," I told Daniel that fateful Thursday morning, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, my voice hollow, heavy from a sleepless night and an epiphany that turned my life upside down. The sheets on our bed were still rumpled, but only on one side. I was sleeping alone, as I had so many times in recent months when he was supposedly late at work. He froze, half motionless, with a sock in one hand, like a deer suddenly caught in the headlights, seized by instinctive fear. "What are you talking about? What is it?" he asked, without looking up. His voice faltered, but his eyes, the eyes I'd looked into for 15 years and looked for comfort, warmth, and love in, didn't meet mine. I had his phone in my hand. He left it on the kitchen table when he went to take a shower, and when the screen blinked several times with new messages, I broke my unspoken rule. I looked into his correspondence. What I saw there destroyed the foundation of everything I thought was true. "You really should be careful with your password," I whispered, scrolling through the pages of messages that stretched over months. There were frank confessions, playful jokes, and meeting plans that were so precisely coordinated that they seemed to be on schedule, during my delays at work, on those days when Leon was away on business, and, worst of all, on those evenings when we all gathered together for wine and laughter. Like 4 good friends. "Gianna, I can explain," he started, but I raised my hand, stopping him in mid-sentence. "Explain what exactly?" My voice was as sharp as glass. The way you've been sleeping with our neighbor for the last 8 months? How did you tell her that our marriage was dying, and then, coming home, whisper to me I love you every night, lying down next to me? Explain it to me, Daniel. Please explain. The air in the room was thick, viscous, as if the house itself was trying to keep the truth from completely destroying the walls in which we lived. Outside the window, on the porch of her house, Emma was watering plants, completely unaware that her carefully constructed facade was about to crack. It's not what you think, Daniel said in the voice he always used when he was trying to convince me that my emotions were nothing more than a whim. That voice used to calm me down, I said, but now it gives me the creeps. Really? Because I think you sleep with our neighbor every time I'm not at home. Vulgarity seemed alien to me, as if everything that did not obey the rules of decency and upbringing with which I grew up was alien, which I had absorbed since childhood as part of the inner code of a woman who knows her own worth, but at that moment it suddenly seemed necessary, almost liberating, as if it was the rudeness and harshness of speech that could to break through the thick veil of pain through which I had to speak. I looked at Daniel, who was still standing in front of me, pale and hunched over, as if the last words had drained the last of his confidence out of him, and I said, I think you've been lying to my face for months, with that expression of sincere concern with which you asked me how my day was when you were already planning a little date. The woman who waves at me every morning from the very porch where you probably stood an hour ago, saying goodbye to her. That morning, something irrevocably changed in me. The initial shock, blind, devastating, like lightning striking the chest, receded, giving way to a strange, frightening calm, like that of a person who realizes that his house is on fire, but does not want to escape, but only watches as the flames devour room after room. I had the feeling that I had stepped out of my body and was watching myself from the outside, like a spectator watching an actress in a tragedy whose plot she had not yet fully realized. I was going to end this, he muttered in a cracked voice, as if he didn't believe what he was saying. It didn't mean anything, Gianna. And then I laughed. Not a quiet, not bitter laugh, but a real one, full of sharp irony, unexpected even for me. This is worse, Daniel, I said, and my voice was no longer trembling. It means that you risked everything we built together for 15 years for something that meant nothing even to you. He reached out to me, perhaps hoping for a gesture of reconciliation, for weakness, for the memory of how I always thought at his touch, but I stepped back, feeling every movement reverberate through my body, like a step away from the past. I saw him struggling to find the words, the very words that could fix everything, rewind time, heal wounds, but there were no such words. They don't exist. Does Leon know? I asked softly, pronouncing the name of my neighbor, as if I had just allowed myself to say out loud the name of another man who had become an unwitting part of my personal tragedy. Of course not. Gianna, please, Daniel pleaded, let's just talk about this. Just us. We can handle this. But I no longer saw my husband in front of me. I was looking at a stranger, an outsider, a man who once held my hand at my father's funeral, when I sobbed into his shoulder, and who once drove 12 hours non-stop to meet me when I was stuck in a strange city on a business trip. And now this same man, a man who turned out to be able to lead a double life without feeling a shadow of guilt until he was caught, stood in front of me and tried to appeal to our memories, to the past, which he himself had ruined. Do you know what's most interesting? I said, and was surprised at the firmness of my voice. The last few months I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. I even started therapy, thinking that the problem was with me, that I was being paranoid, that I was feeling too strongly. I blamed myself for putting this distance between us. I swallowed hard, feeling a heavy lump rise in my throat. Outside, Emma finished watering the plants and returned to the house, the very house where, as it now became clear, my husband visited much more often than I could have imagined. I'm going to work, I finally said, turning to the door. And when I come back, I expect you to be gone. Gianna, this is my house too, he protested, trying to regain at least some control over the situation. I turned to him, and my smile, although it appeared on my face, brought with it neither warmth nor pity. You're right, I said, this is your home, too. So I'll keep it simple. You have two options: leave voluntarily while we figure this out, or I'll call Leon Marinetti right now and tell him everything. Every detail of your cozy little agreement, every nasty lie, every betrayal. The blood drained rapidly from his face. I could see it, how his features were slowly cooling, how his last confidence was disappearing. You won't test me, I continued, surprised at my unwavering determination. You've obviously underestimated me all these months. Don't make that mistake again. When I left the room, and then left the house, heading to work, as if it were the most ordinary day, something strange happened inside me, something crystallized, took shape as a goal that had previously been only a pain. It wasn't supposed to end with Daniel just moving out. No. It would be too easy, too neat. It's too right. This betrayal, this humiliation, committed right under my very nose, deserves something more, a response that none of them forgot. That day at work was a blur. I sat in meetings, took notes, answered emails, and smiled at colleagues, but my entire inner life was focused on one thing: fragments of memories that now had a different meaning, reinterpreted in the light of a new reality. I remembered how he said he was late, and when he returned home, he smelled of perfume, which I had never had. I remembered how I went to my sister's house on the weekend, and she, smiling, told me about a new guy who loves fishing, but for some reason he never brought any fish or photos. I remembered Emma making strangely precise remarks that could only come from someone who was all too familiar with my life. All the signs were there, red flags waving, which I didn't want to see because I trusted them. Because she loved him. When I came home that evening, the air in the house seemed to thicken, heavy, filled with anxious anticipation, as it happens before a storm, and when I entered the kitchen, the first thing I saw was Daniel's face, deathly pale, with a frozen expression of resignation and guilt. He was sitting at the table, hands clasped. He entered the castle, his gaze fixed on nothing, and when he heard my footsteps, he slowly raised his eyes. I canceled the dinner meeting, he said, as if it were meant to mean more than just a change of plans, as if it were a symbol, a gesture of remorse, almost a sacrifice he had made in the name of our conversation, our history, our union, perhaps forever destroyed. I didn't answer right away. I just put my purse on the floor, very carefully, as if any sudden movement could lead to an explosion, and then, without changing my expression, I said, "Is that what you said to Emma? That you had to cancel your plans because your wife found out about it?" His shoulders twitched, small, almost imperceptible, but I caught it like a predator catches the scent of fear. "I didn't talk to her," he squeezed out. "Liar," I said calmly and took out my phone. The cold metal in my palm gave my words weight, as if it were proof, an iron argument that could not be dismissed. At lunchtime, I installed a call monitoring app, an act that just a couple of weeks ago would have seemed unthinkable, shameful, and somehow undignified. But times have changed, just as I have changed, and now I was no longer afraid to resort to measures that I would have considered extreme before. "You called her from this number this afternoon," I continued, "and you talked to her for 6 minutes and 23 seconds. The shock on his face was almost satisfying. "How did you do that? What is it?" he asked, and there was no anger in his voice, but fright. "Does it matter?" I interrupted. "The important thing is that you keep lying to me. Even now." I slowly sat down in front of him and looked straight into his eyes. "I have only one question. One. Why her? Why is it Emma, our neighbor, of all people?" He looked away, his eyes wandering around the table, as if he could find the answer there. "It wasn't planned," he whispered. "It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice level, but rage was bubbling inside. "You made a choice. Every time she was there. Every time you said you were late or worried about work. She was there." And his next words hit me harder than I could have expected. "When you were late at work or tired because of your promotion, she was there," he said, almost regretfully, but to me it sounded like an accusation. as a reproach for the fact that I lived my life to the fullest. I looked at him, and everything inside me was squeezed with pain and indignation. I worked late to secure our future, I said. I aspired to something more so that we could afford a house, travel, family. Are you accusing me of investing in us? My voice became dangerously quiet. Is this my fault? Because I was building a career, and you were feeling yourself deprived of attention? That's not what I meant, he said quickly, backing away as if my words could physically hurt. I'm trying to explain, not justify. I stood up abruptly. Pack your things, I said. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here today. He held out his hands, pleading. Gianna, please. 15 years old. Don't throw it away. His voice trembled. He almost broke into tears. I made a terrible mistake. I will do everything to fix it. I froze for a moment. 15 years is really a lot. This is the life we built together, layer by layer, brick by brick. We talked about having children, even though we kept putting it off. We had holidays, anniversaries, difficulties, joys, mutual friends and enemies, complicated family relationships, bills, loans, plans. To unravel all this is like ripping the heart out of your chest. But then I remembered the messages I'd read, the ease with which they talked about their meetings, those laughing emojis that Emma rewarded Daniel with when he wrote that I was late again. It was so ordinary, so familiar, it's soulless. I took a deep breath. Did you know, I began slowly, that last year I declined a promotion to Chicago because you said you couldn't leave this house? This area? You said that you have everything here, friends, work, habits. Was it because of her? I looked straight into his eyes. Did you manipulate my career to stay close to your lover? He was silent. And his silence told me more than any words. Get out, I whispered. He didn't move. Something snapped inside me. Get out. I shouted, and my voice, harsh and hoarse, bounced off the walls like a blow, surely heard by the neighbors, surely heard by Emma. He jumped up as if from a blow and stepped back, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Maybe I was a stranger at that moment. I'm going to buy something, he muttered. We'll talk tomorrow. When we cool down. I didn't answer. I watched him hurriedly climb the stairs, and a strange sense of clarity came over me. Gianna, having been married for 15 years, I never yelled at him. I've always smoothed corners, looked for compromises, and been the one putting out the fire. But not anymore. While Daniel was packing upstairs, I went to our window and stared at the Marinetti house across the street, through the windows of which soft amber light filtered through, casting flickering silhouettes on the sloping curtains, indistinct like thoughts in the head of a person standing on the threshold of chaos. Behind these shadows were hidden other people's secrets, someone else's life, in which, as it turned out, I was given the role of nothing more than a random passerby, and I asked myself, is Emma panicking now? Was she sitting there, clutching her phone, wondering what would happen next? Has Daniel already warned her that I know? Or are they together, whispering, making plans, choosing the words with which he will try to dissuade me from a divorce tomorrow? At that moment, my phone vibrated, pulling me out of the sticky silence. A message from my sister Olivia. Is everything okay? It looks like you didn't answer our call earlier. I haven't told anyone yet. It was all hidden somewhere deep inside, like a wound hidden under clothes that you don't dare show. Because if you say it out loud, if you call a spade, it will become a reality from which you can't escape, you can't wake up. But when I saw Daniel coming down the stairs, awkwardly dragging his bag, packed in a hurry, like a fugitive leaving the battlefield, I realized that I needed someone nearby who would be on my side. Daniel is cheating with our neighbor. Can you come back tomorrow? I wrote. The answer came almost instantly, on the way. Don't do anything I wouldn't do until I get there. It made me smile for the first time in a long time, even for a second, given Olivia's penchant for radical solutions. Her list of prohibitions was almost negligible. "I'll be at the Marriott downtown," Daniel said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, as if expecting me to ask why Marriott or ask to stay. "Please call me tomorrow. We'll get through this." I silently watched him leave, and the sound of the door closing, hollow and final, echoed in me. He didn't go to the Marriott. I knew it. He drove to where they were waiting for him. Where they don't ask questions. Where Leon is going on a business trip tomorrow. The thought made me so furious that it seemed even the walls were shaking. That night, I barely slept a wink. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, as if I could see the answers in its whitewash, going over every word, every lie, every time I felt that something was wrong, but I pushed these thoughts away. By morning, the sadness, at first viscous and oppressive, like wet snow, turned into something harder and colder, crystallized determination. I knew what I had to do. When Olivia arrived, her hugs were so tight, as if she wanted to pick me up from the pieces. "Tell me everything," she demanded, and I told her. With every phrase, with every word, I felt a plan forming inside me, clear, logical, strategically verified. When I finished, she looked at me with an expression in which anxiety and admiration were mixed. "Are you sure about this?" "What is it?" she asked. "This is an extreme." "So sleeping with a neighbor for 8 months is not an extreme?" I replied, trying not to let my voice waver. "They humiliated me in my own home. This is just a retaliatory measure." Olivia didn't argue, just nodded. "Good. Then let's get to work." Daniel never understood one thing about me. He, like many who used to think of my wife as a background, underestimated my ability to think strategically. You can't run a marketing department without knowing how to make plans for several steps ahead. "First of all," I said to Olivia the next morning, as we sat at the kitchen table, where he had been sitting with the face of a penitent the day before, "I need to confirm Leon's schedule." She frowned. "And how are you going to do that without telling Emma?" I smiled, thinly, cheerlessly. "Because Leon and I have something in common. We're both workaholics. He posts a schedule of open days on Facebook every week." We quickly found his page, and indeed, a marathon of screenings was planned for Saturday. "Fine. Perfect. Now we need to get Daniel's things," I said. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" "No. Only those that speak louder than words." We spent the morning, methodically, almost ceremoniously, choosing from the closet his favorite suits, carefully pressed and expensive as his ego, the wristwatch I gave him for our 10th anniversary, with an engraved inscription, monogrammed shirts, gifts from his mother, which he treasured as relics. I carefully packed everything into suitcases, adding his perfumes, necessary medicines, and, finally, our shared photo in a silver frame, which he kept on the bedside table. "And this?" Olivia asked, holding his passport in her hands. I thought about it, then said, "Put it down. It might come in handy." Suddenly he decides to start a new life. By noon, 3 large suitcases were standing at the entrance. I sent a message, "I've packed the necessary things for you. You can pick up the rest later." His reply came quickly. "Thank you. Can we talk today?" I didn't answer. Instead, clutching my phone in my palm as if I could erase this message by force of will, I dialed the number of my lawyer, a woman named Regina, a real shark in the world of corporate law, who for years defended the interests of my company, earning a reputation for not asking unnecessary questions and not tolerating weakness. She answered immediately. Her voice, as always, was businesslike and collected. After a short exchange, she agreed to meet with me on the same day, and this was the first real step I took, not as a wife, not as a devoted partner, not as a naive woman, but as a person who knows the value of justice and knows how to act quickly and coolly. "You're not wasting your time," Olivia remarked, watching me grab my keys and leave the house with an expression on my face that leaves no doubt that someone will start paying today. Why would I do that? I replied without hesitation. They didn't kill us. While Olivia stayed at home, ready to cover my back and continue her own intelligence operations, I met Regina in her office, where the glass walls and snow-white shelves created a sense of surgical sterility, as if lies were not only not allowed here, but they evaporated on the threshold. I told her everything, every detail, every guess, confirmed by digital footprints, screenshots, recordings of phone conversations in which the voices that once whispered words of love to me now sounded like evidence of betrayal. She carefully wrote down every word, and her face became more and more gloomy. Is there any digital evidence? She clarified. There is. Screenshots, calls, dates, locations. She nodded. Good. What do you want from me today? I sat up straight in my chair. A preliminary agreement on separation. And for the accounts to be frozen. She studied me without hiding her appreciation. Are you sure you don't want to try the consultation first? The court may take this as a gesture of goodwill. I'm not interested in what looks favorable, I said coldly. I'm interested in what's fair. He cheated on me in my house, with our neighbor, for 8 months. He influenced my work decisions to make time for his meetings with Emma. I want him to feel it. Regina softened her expression. I understand you. I will prepare the documents by the evening. When I got home, Olivia was already seething with activity. I've done some digging, she said with the triumph of an archaeologist pulling an ancient artifact out of the ground. Emma is a real butterfly on social media. She showed me her Instagram account, which was closed, but I still managed to access it through a mutual friend. We started scrolling through the tape, and every frame that had seemed harmless before now took on a different meaning. Here's Emma at a restaurant that Daniel says he's never been to. Here is a bracelet identical to the one he allegedly gave to his mother. Here's the coast she went to over the weekend when Daniel claimed he was at a conference in Chicago. She's flaunting it, I whispered, feeling an unpleasant sensation rise in my throat. Right under everyone's nose. And that's not all, Olivia said, her voice darkening. I think they used your house. What? I turned to her in disbelief. She unfolded a photo of Emma on the screen, smiling and holding a glass of wine, but my attention was focused on the background. There, over her shoulder, out of focus but quite clearly discernible, was my unique tile apron in the kitchen, unmistakably with its pattern, which I had been choosing for weeks. The realization hit me like a crashing wave. They weren't just sleeping together, they were using my house as a place for their meetings, as a love nest when I wasn't there. In my bed. At my desk. Among my things. Something cold and hard squeezed my chest. Plans have changed, I said slowly, keeping the tremor out of my voice. We're not just packing his stuff. We will deliver them tomorrow. I barely closed my eyes again that night, but now it wasn't sadness that kept me awake, but anticipation. Saturday morning turned out to be bright and clear, as if nature itself had mockingly accompanied our day of revenge. From my bedroom window, I watched Leon, dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase, heading for his car. He was away for the whole day. An hour later, a new message came from Daniel. Can we meet for coffee and talk? I answered briefly, I'm busy. I'll let you know when I'm ready. I could almost hear his irritation. Fine. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked as we loaded our suitcases into the car. Absolutely. What Daniel didn't know was that while he was having affairs behind my back, I was slowly and unobtrusively making friends in the neighborhood, especially with Mrs. Panerillo, a former teacher who lives next door to Marinetti. During one of our morning walks, she casually said, you know, when Leon's not here, Emma often gets mail anyway. What a shame. Leon is such a sweet person. I didn't think much of it at the time. Now I realized that Elena was trying to tell me something, Not directly, no. She was too tactful for that, too respectful of other people's boundaries to voice out loud what she hardly dared to admit in her thoughts. But there were hints, and they are like tiny cracks on glass. Now they have formed into a single picture that threatens to split. That morning, on this strange, tense, and full of impending denouement, I almost without thinking sent her a message, short but precise. Is Emma home alone today? The answer came immediately, as if Elena had been waiting for my question, as if she had been watching all this time in silence, but with an inner shudder, wishing that the truth would finally be told. Yes, dear. Leon went to work. She was at home all morning. Everything is fine. I stared at the screen, allowing myself my first smile of the day, not triumphant, not gloating, but cold and full of inevitability. Everything is perfect. Could you write to me if she leaves? And, as I expected, Elena replied in one line, of course. It was, of course, like a reassurance from an accomplice, like a silent vow of silent solidarity between two women, each of whom knew what it meant to be betrayed. Olivia and I waited until noon, not taking our eyes off our phone screens, listening to the sounds of the street and feeling the tension in the air thicken, becoming almost physical. No messages from Elena meant that Emma was still at home. There were also no messages from Daniel. Probably, having exhausted his attempts for today, he left to digest my silence, not knowing that during this time an avalanche of consequences was already bearing down on him. Are you ready? Olivia asked as we drove slowly, with intense precision, like actresses entering the main stage of a play, to Marinetti's house. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs like I was about to jump into icy water. Ready. We unloaded the suitcases, 3 large, heavy, extremely eloquent evidences of the life we had lived together, and rolled them to Marinetti's front door. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel every beat in my temples, but my hands remained steady as I pressed the bell, and the sound that sounded inside the house echoed in my chest. Time stretched out like a taut string, and finally, the door swung open. Emma was standing there, in her house clothes, with her hair carelessly pulled back in a ponytail, and with a face that instantly lost all color when she saw me standing in front of her with a cold smile and 2 suitcases on either side. Her gaze darted to Olivia, then back to me, and a shiver ran across her lips as she whispered, Gianna, is everything okay? Everything is just fine, Emma, I said evenly, with that smile that stretches only on my lips, not touching my eyes. I brought Daniel's things. Since he spends so much time here, I thought he might need them. A look of horror and panic crossed her face, and her fingers gripped the door jamb as if it were the last support in a world that was beginning to crumble. I don't understand what you're talking about, she muttered, the words stuttering, her lips trembling, her eyes darting in search of a way out. I just bowed my head slightly, like a teacher explaining the obvious to a stubborn student. Strange. Because according to the messages on his phone, you two have been pretty close for several months, and without taking my eyes off her face, I pushed the largest suitcase forward with my foot. His clothes are there, his toiletries. And here, she patted the middle one, are the monogram shirts, the ones you praised him for. The ones his mother gave him. Emma turned pale, and her eyes widened like a child caught stealing. Gianna, please, she whispered, barely audible, looking around at the empty hall behind her. It's not what you think. Oh, really? I said, my voice still steady, but there was steel in it. What do you think I think, Emma? Why do you sleep with my husband in my bed when I'm on a business trip? Why are you laughing behind my back at the neighborhood barbecue? What are you? At that moment, my voice was interrupted by a low, restrained male voice, and I saw Leon's figure appear from behind her. He must have returned early. His face was surprised, wary. He darted his gaze between Emma and me, then at the suitcases. Everything was not going according to plan. Leon, you're back early, Emma began, but he interrupted her. The open house was cancelled. The Sellers have family circumstances. His gaze settled on me. Gianna? What's happening? I froze for a moment. Everything should have been different. Emma alone, exposed, cornered. But now before me stood Leon, a man who, like me, trusted, unaware that every evening, while he was honestly working, a scene of betrayal unfolded in his house. "Your wife has been having an affair with my husband for 8 months now," I said clearly, as if I were reading a verdict. "I found out about it on Thursday. I brought his stuff here because it looks like this is where he spends most of his time when you're working." There was silence, so thick that it seemed as if the air had condensed into concrete. Leon froze, and I saw his face, open, good, natured, full of the old trust change, go through stages of confusion, disbelief, and finally realization. "This is ridiculous," Emma finally muttered, looking at her husband with a desperate attempt to squeeze out a smile, pathetic, strained, designed more to hide her inner panic than to really make anyone laugh. "Leon, she's obviously having some kind of breakdown," she added, no longer with the same confident intonation, but with the nervous haste with which a person tries to extinguish a flame by pouring water on it, not noticing that it has been boiling for a long time. She began, but Leon, who was standing next to her, interrupted her, and his voice, devoid of any color, was so dangerously quiet that even the wind, stirring the leaves on the trees on both sides of the street, seemed suddenly muffled. "What is it?" he asked with serene clarity, turning to me. "Do you have any proof of this?" I nodded silently, took out my phone, unlocked the screen, scrolled through the gallery to the desired location, and without saying a word, handed the device to him. At that moment, Emma made a sudden movement, rushing towards him, as if wanting to snatch the evidence from his hands before they could completely cut through her carefully constructed reality, but Olivia, silent and collected, as if she had a premonition of this, stepped between them, raising her palm in a warning gesture. "Don't," she said softly, but with such firmness that Emma stopped, her body tense like a string, and she grabbed the door jamb again, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling. Meanwhile, Leon slowly scrolled through the screenshots of the messages, which contained ambiguous phrases, quite unambiguous confessions, and even cynical jokes related to us, our marriages, and our families. His face became harder and harder, the muscles in his jaw began to tremble, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were no longer just cold, they were empty, like water in a winter lake. "How much? What is it?" he asked dully. "Leon, please, I can explain." Emma began, but he interrupted her again, louder this time, and his voice exploded like a lash, making us all flinch. "How much?" he roared, and tears immediately began to flow down Emma's cheeks, smearing her mascara, making her face look like a blurred painting. "It just happened, Leon," she gasped. "It didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly, not because it was funny, but because at that moment, rage mixed with fatigue was already beginning to boil in me. "That's funny," I said. "That's exactly what Daniel said." The same words, the same expression, the same cheap justification. As if he had been called by name, a car braked sharply at the curb, and a moment later Daniel jumped out of it, hurrying, with panic on his face, with disheveled hair and a carelessly buttoned collar. He looked around at us, the suitcases, Olivia, Emma with smeared makeup, me with a straight posture and a cold face, and understood everything. "Gianna, what are you doing? Stop it!" he shouted, approaching, as if it were something shameful and requiring immediate intervention. Leon handed the phone back to me and stepped forward. "I think your wife is taking your things to your new home," he said, and his voice was so calm that it was frightening. Daniel froze, looking from Leon to Emma, and then back to me, as if looking for salvation, an excuse, at least a shadow of logic. "Leon, listen, this is not that," he began, but Leon interrupted him. "If you say it's not what it seems, I'll hit you," he said softly, but there was such readiness in his voice, such final confidence, that even I took a half step back. "Because it looks like you've been sleeping with my wife behind my back." "Behind Gianna's back." He pointed to the suitcases. "Take your shit and get out of my territory." Daniel's face contorted as if he had been slapped with words, and he turned to Emma. Emma, tell him. What should I tell him? I intervened, and at that moment my voice trembled for the first time, but not from fear, but from bitterness, from betrayal, from long months of lies, which I, as it turned out, breathed. What were you planning to spend the weekend together? That you were in our bed while I was on a business trip? That you told her that our marriage was falling apart and that everything was fine with me? The words poured out on their own, releasing themselves like water from a ruptured dam. Meanwhile, a crowd began to gather on the sidewalk. Neighbors, dog walkers, grandmothers with mailboxes, children with bicycles. All those who always seemed far away now became witnesses, jurors in this involuntary trial. Among them, I noticed Elena Panarillo, standing to the side with a leash in her hands and a tired, sad look, nodding to me as a sign of support. Everyone's watching, Emma hissed, trying to pull her husband back into the house. We need to talk about this in private. No, Leon snapped, brushing her hand off his shoulder like dust. I'm done with privacy and secrets. Then he turned back to me. Did you know about this before Thursday? I shook my head. No. I found their correspondence on his phone. Leon nodded. At that moment, that silent, heavy understanding was established between us, which unites only those who have experienced the same thing: betrayal, pain, disappointment. Members of a club that no one ever wants to join. Daniel, I said, turning to my husband. I've frozen our accounts. She filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact you on Monday. I pointed at the suitcases. You should accept that. I guess you need somewhere to stay, since both of your beds are unavailable now. He stared at me as if for the first time he saw, not the woman he had betrayed, but the one who stood before him now, strong, calm, determined. You can't do this, he whispered. I've already done it. Leon stepped forward, picked up the largest suitcase, and pressed it hard into Daniel's chest. Take your things and leave. Right now. In complete silence, surrounded by many eyes, Daniel began loading suitcases into the car. Emma disappeared into the house, slamming the door behind her, and her crying continued to echo. When the car disappeared around the bend and the street resumed its normal breathing, Leon turned to me. I'm sorry, he said simply. Me too. I nodded. Coffee sometimes? He suggested after a short pause, and there was something sincere, calm, wounded in his voice. I think we have a lot to talk about. Despite everything, I found myself nodding. I'd like that. As Olivia and I walked back to my car, the weight that had been pressing on my chest since Thursday seemed lighter. It didn't pass. The pain will remain for a long time, but it will turn into something that I can carry. Are you okay? Olivia asked, squeezing my hand. I looked back at Marinetti's house, where Leon was standing alone on the porch, looking as shocked as I had a few days ago. No, I answered honestly. But I think it will be so. It's been 6 months. The seasons, replacing each other with habitual equanimity, as if reminding, everything passes, changed, and with them the lacerations that once seemed bottomless began to heal. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected, as if the law itself understood that nothing more could be put together. Daniel didn't resist. In fact, he couldn't, not after the evidence I presented, not after we both no longer had the energy to play out the farce of a normal married life. I left our home, not out of weakness, but to stop living among the shadows of betrayal. He was left feeling guilty, which I suspected was still keeping him awake. Emma and Leon Marinetti put their house up for sale 3 weeks after that memorable morning when the truth, like a knife, cut through the usual order of things. I heard that they broke up almost immediately, quietly, without scandals. They just went in different directions, like people who suddenly turned out to be strangers. Leon stayed in the city. Emma went to live with her parents in Michigan. Over time, neighborhood gossip found new targets. Someone was discussing someone's new fence. Someone was discussing a tennis coach's novel. Life, as always, went on. Although Elena Panerillo still brings me her signature cookies from time to time and quietly says that she is proud of me, I smile back because I'm grateful, but deep down I know that the pride doesn't belong to her, but to me. In those first months after the divorce, Daniel tried to reconnect a couple of times, texts in which he apologized, letters in which he claimed that he had started therapy and understood a lot, once even flowers delivered to my office along with a postcard offering to meet, just to talk. I took the flowers to a nursing home nearby and didn't reply to any of the messages. Some wounds don't need to be stitched up, they should stay to remind you that you survived. Some betrayals don't deserve to be forgiven. What surprised me the most was my unexpected friendship with Leon. Those ill-fated coffees turned into weekly walks, then into infrequent but deep conversations over dinner, where two broken people found strange solace in understanding each other's pain. Do you think they were worth it? Leon asked one such evening when we were sitting on my back porch, and the summer twilight was full of fireflies and the scent of jasmine. He shook his glass of wine and continued, I mean, was it worth losing everything we had? I was silent for a long time, thinking about it. I don't think it's a price issue, she finally said. It was about convenience. About selfishness. About the fact that they felt like they were missing something, not in us, but in themselves. Leon nodded slowly, as if my every word resonated with him. Sometimes I wonder if I missed the signs, he confessed. Shouldn't I have known? I sighed. Me too. But then I realized that their choice was not a reflection of our shortcomings. It was a mirror of their own emptiness. He squeezed my hand, not like a man wanting more, but like a friend who appreciates intimacy based on truth, not illusions. I'm going to Colorado next month. A week in the mountains, clean air, a bit of silence. I think you'd like it. Just as a friend. Separate rooms, I promise. I smiled. I would like that. Later that night, after Leon left, I stood in my bedroom, the room that once belonged to Daniel and me, and realized with surprise that for the first time in 6 months I hadn't thought about him all day. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't remember. It was a small moment, but significant. The healing, I realized, wasn't loud or sudden. It comes in silence between breaths. I picked up my phone and texted Olivia, I think I'm really going to Colorado. The answer came quickly, as always. Teasingly, the guy next door. So far, as a friend? I chuckled. And then she went to the window overlooking Marinetti's former house, where a young couple with a child and another one on the way now lived. I brought them wine and biscuits, bought, not my own. Because the truth is easier than a lie. I didn't know what lay ahead, not with Leon, not in my career, not in this house where every window had once looked out on pain. But I knew one thing, I had survived. And I will never let myself be destroyed again. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.